A disturbing video from the Jalisco New Generation cartel has spread through the internet like wildfire. The cartel's leader, El Mencho, has sent a chilling threat to Milenio TV's journalist Azucena Uresti, who covered the turf war between the Jalisco New Generation cartel, CJNG, and the United Cartels in the Tierra Caliente region. As a man with a deadly reputation for keeping his word, all of Mexico knows the worst is yet to come. Public enemy number 1. El Mencho was the same man who in 2015 had consolidated his drug operations in Jalisco, which over time turned into a power base. He could go on the offensive with the Sinaloa cartel if he wanted, but that is not what he did. He took aim at the Mexican government itself. The CJNG once ambushed a police convoy on its way to Guadalajara through a mountainous road in San Sebastián del Oeste, Jalisco, that lay in the middle of a valley. Their movement was stopped by a blockade of burning vehicles, and immediately, gunmen appeared above them and sprayed the police officers with machine guns and grenades. 15 officers were killed, and 5 others were injured. The gunmen escaped unharmed, and that same day, the police chief of Zacoalco de Torres was murdered by the CJNG. The incident shocked the country. Gunfights between the authorities and cartels are common in Mexico, but usually the security forces come out on top. It was the deadliest single attack on the police since 2010. The attack was a personal affront to the Mexican government, and President Calderón began a concerted military effort to capture El Mencho called Operation Jalisco. On May 1st, security forces got intelligence that El Mencho was in a meeting in Tonaya, Jalisco, and set out to capture him. In response, the CJNG laid a siege and put a total crackdown on activities in Guadalajara, and thus began a wave of violence that would spread through 20 different towns in 3 states. The gunmen threw 30 roadblocks around Guadalajara, and over the course of the battle, 39 buses, 11 buses, and 16 gas stations were set on fire. The gunmen fought back 10,000 Mexican troops and shot down a Cougar X-725 helicopter using a grenade launcher in Villa Purificación, Jalisco. It was the most brazen attack on security forces by a cartel since the beginning of the drug war in the early 2000s. It is believed the chaos was a distraction the gunmen created to allow El Mencho, who was in the city for a meeting, to escape. The battle line had been drawn and El Mencho was winning. The CJNG was not just a cartel anymore, it was a twisted cult of personality that revolved around El Mencho, who the CJNG foot soldiers called Lord Mencho. It all started from Michoacán de Ocampo, a western Mexican state that has been described as the soul of Mexico. It is bordered by Colima and Jalisco to the west and northwest, Guanajuato to the north, Querétaro to the northeast, the state of Mexico to the east, and Guerrero to the southeast. The state played a major role during the Mexican War of Independence, and its capital, Morelia, is named after a hero of the war, José María Morelos. Today, the state, whose inhabitants are historically fishermen, has a booming tourism industry and is home to cultural heritages like the Pueblos Mágicos, UNESCO heritage sites, and its famous Day of the Dead celebrations. Michoacán has 113 municipalities, one of which is Aguililla. It is in the rural town of Culotitlan, Aguililla, that Rubén Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born in July 1964. The boy came from a poor family of 5 that cultivated avocados. In the 5th grade, he dropped out of school to grow avocados, and when he was 14, he was hired by the powerful Aguililla family, the Valencias, to guard their avocado farms and prevent people from stealing their produce. Avocado is one of Mexico's biggest exports, and the Valencias made enormous sales. But avocados were not their only source of wealth. The family was known as the Avocado Cartel because they hid drugs in their avocados and would evolve into the Milenio Cartel. In the 1980s, Nemesio illegally immigrated to the United States and settled in the San Francisco Bay Area, California. Although he had left Mexico behind, he did not stay away from crimes, and at 19, he was arrested for stolen property and possession of firearms. It is also believed that he remained in the drug business in the U.S., as border entry records show that he crossed the U.S.-Mexico border several times with different aliases. He was involved in meth production and trade in Redwood City with Abigail Gonzalez Valencia. Abigail would later become his brother-in-law and the future El Queenie. In 1989, after El Mencho was arrested for selling drugs, he was deported but later re-entered the U.S. He continued dealing in narcotics, and in 1992, the long arm of the law would catch up with him again. Nemesio and his brother had gone to a San Francisco bar named The Imperial to sell heroin to some buyers. 9 ounces for $9,500. It was Abraham's deal, and Nemesio had followed as a lookout. Nemesio was 26 years old at the time and street smart following all his time spent dealing in drugs. He realized they were dealing with undercover cops after noticing the dollar bills were perfectly stacked and not loose bills, and warned his brother not to do business with the men again. But it was too late. 3 weeks after the incident, the brothers were swooped up by the police and now faced federal charges. Nemesio initially pleaded innocent, but his brother had felony drug sentences on his record and could be handed a life sentence if convicted. To protect his brother from life imprisonment, Nemesio pleaded guilty and was given a 5-year sentence, which he did at the immigrant-overrun Big Spring Correctional Facility in West Texas. 3 years later, he was released on parole and deported to Mexico. He was 30 years old and had spent almost 2 decades in the United States with nothing to show for it. On his return to Mexico, he secured a job as a police officer in Tomatlan, Jalisco, with the help of the Valencias. Although he was working in law enforcement, at this point I believe Nemesio's mind was made up on the path he was going to take. His return to Mexico can be seen as the birth of El Mencho. El Mencho is a phonetic derivation of Nemesio. The name would become the most feared name in Mexico, but before then, El Mencho was just another cartel member. After a few years in law enforcement, El Mencho resigned as a police officer and became a full-time member of the Milenio cartel. To strengthen his relationship with the cartel and probably to boost his status within the clan, El Mencho married Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia, a daughter of the Valencia clan. El Mencho's intense dedication to the cartel, along with his marriage to Rosalinda, would make the Milenio cartel his vehicle to the top of the Mexican cartel scene. It was a wise power move on his part, but an unfortunate turn of incidents for the rest of the world. The Milenio cartel boss, Armando Cornelio El Maradona, was protected by an assassin squad, and El Mencho began his climb as a member of that squad. These assassins are called sicarios by the Mexican cartels. On the 23rd of August 2003, El Maradona was arrested by Mexican authorities, and it spelled the beginning of troubles for the Valencia family. A rival cartel, the Los Zetas, with help from the Gulf Cartel, ruthlessly cut down on Milenio cartel members in Michoacán and forced the Valencias into exile in Jalisco. Jalisco is a western Mexican state that is bordered by 6 states: Nayarit, Colima, Zacatecas, Aguascalientes, Guanajuato, and Michoacán, with one of its borders open to the coast of Mexico. It is one of Mexico's most important states, economically and culturally, due to its rich natural resources and vibrant culture. Almost everything grows in Jalisco, and several characteristic traits of Mexico, mariachi, sombreros, and tequila, originate from the state. Not surprisingly, Jalisco prides itself as an epicenter of Mexican culture, and its motto, Jalisco es Mexico, translates as Jalisco is Mexico. Unfortunately, all these natural advantages simply made it a thriving haven for Mexican cartels, and at the time the Valencias were exiled to the state, El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel was running the show in Jalisco. El Mencho relocated to join the family in the state capital, Guadalajara, Mexico's 3rd largest city. Here he would play a bigger role in the cartel, as it was no longer as strong as it was before, and with the death of bigger players, there was space to move up the ladder. The Milenio cartel allied themselves with a subgroup of the Sinaloa cartel headed by Ignacio Nacho Coronel, and began to oversee the cartel's drug operations, finances, and murders in Colima and Jalisco. Coronel was a high-ranking drug lord and a close associate of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. You see, that's the way the cartels work. They are like large corporations that try to corner markets and outsource their activities to smaller organizations to manage. But this time, those activities were drug trades, extortions, and even human trafficking. To keep their clients, these smaller cartels have to be as efficient as possible, and in the world of crime, that means murders and tortures. Despite their twist in fate following their exile, the Milenio cartel held on for a few years, but not for long. On the 28th of October 2009, their leader Oscar Orlando Nava Valencia El Lobo was arrested. The following year, in May, his brother Juan Carlos El Tigre was also arrested. 2 months afterwards, Coronel was killed in a shootout with the Mexican army, and the cartel began to tear at the seams. With all his bosses either killed or arrested, El Mencho made a move at the leadership structure, and he had the backing of a member of the Valencia clan, Eric Salazar Valencia. On the other hand, though, a part of the Milenio cartel wanted Elpidio Mojaro Ramirez El Pilo to become the new cartel boss. El Pilo had been a close associate of both El Lobo and El Tigre before their arrests. His side, which was called La Resistencia, accused El Mencho's side, Los Marazetas, or the Zeta Killers, of handing over El Lobo to the authorities. They would come at loggerheads when El Mencho asked the other faction to hand over Gerardo Tecado of Mendoza, who had killed a group of El Mencho's men in Tecom and Colima. El Pilo's sect refused, and a fierce war began between both sides. The war was fought for control of the cartel as well as control of drug smuggling turfs in Jalisco. It is no surprise that Jalisco became the focus of not just the war in the Milenio cartel, but between most cartels in Mexico since the days of the drug wars. The state capital, Guadalajara, is home to a thriving pharmaceutical industry that makes it easy to produce cheap drugs like methamphetamine. The lands are fertile for growing marijuana and poppy, and the port on the coast allows boats from Asia to pour in with precursor drugs that enable more expensive drugs like fentanyl to be produced. Seizing the initiative, the Matazetas initially took the appearance of the good guys. They launched propaganda against La Resistencia, claiming to be against the extortions done by rival cartels. It is also the reason they took the name Zeta Killers, as La Resistencia called them Los Torcidos. The Los Zetas, which is made up of former military and vigilantes, were particularly aggressive during the period, and the Matazetas profited in public appeal by claiming their goal was to eradicate the group. Their methods, however, were not any less violent than the group. To announce their arrival on the cartel scene, the Matazetas kidnapped and tortured 3 men believed to be linked with the Los Zetas. They shared a video on YouTube in June 2009, which showed the tortured men being interviewed by masked men armed with rifles. On that same day, Mexican authorities found the corpses of the men inside an abandoned truck in Cancun, Quintana Roo. They also found a message in the truck that read, "We are the new group, Matazetas, Zeta Killers, and we are against kidnapping and extortion, and we will fight them in all states for a cleaner Mexico." Los Matazetas eventually won the war, and after securing its position in western Mexico, changed its name to Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJN. On the 20th of September 2011, 2 trucks dumped 35 bodies, 23 men and 12 women, on the main road in Veracruz in the middle of rush hour. It was around 5:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and a message was left beside the bodies. No more extortions, no more killings of innocent people. Zetas in the state of Veracruz and politicians helping them. This is going to happen to you, or we can shoot you as we did to you guys before too. People of Veracruz, do not allow yourselves to be extorted. Do not pay for protection. If you do, it's because you want to. This is the only thing these people, Los Zetas, can do. This is going to happen to all the Zetas fucks who continue to operate in Veracruz. This territory has a new proprietor, GN. At first, many thought the Gente Nueva cartel or the Sinaloa cartel perpetuated the heinous crime, but the Los Matazetas would later claim responsibility. In a video released on the 27th of September 2011, CJN members clad in balaclava vests and carrying rifles apologized for the massacres and told the public that they aimed to eliminate the Los Zetas. They claimed to be on the side of the government and agreed that the authorities should not negotiate with the cartels. Interestingly though, only 3 people of the 35 people killed had ties to the Los Zetas. Why did they kill the other people then? On October 6, 2011, 36 bodies were found in 3 different houses in Boca del Rio, Veracruz. The next day, the CJN massacred another 67 people. 2 days later, 10 more bodies were discovered in the city. The state attorney general was forced to resign. It was heedless violence. In just 18 days, the state of Veracruz had reported 18 killings, and President Felipe Calderón launched Operation Safe Veracruz in response. On April 17, 2012, the dismembered remains of 14 Los Zetas members were found inside a Chrysler Voyager in Nuevo Laredo. The men were killed by CJN assassins, and an undisclosed message was found with them. The city is a Los Zetas stronghold, and after the attacks, El Chapo himself sent a message to the rival cartel and promised to clean up Nuevo Laredo. In the 1 year between these attacks, a war raged between the CJN or Matazetas and the Los Zetas. The CJN had formed an alliance with the Sinaloa cartel, sworn enemies of the Zetas, and were now helping El Chapo's cartel to fight Los Zetas in Jalisco. However, true to Mexican cartel traditions, the alliance would not last. On the 22nd of February 2014, El Chapo was arrested in Mazatlan. 6 months later, CJN gunmen entered a restaurant in the resort city of Puerto Vallarta and disrupted the birthday party of El Chapo's son, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar. Jesus and his brother Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar were abducted at gunpoint with a few of their friends while they were dining. Although they were later released, their abduction was a humiliation to the Sinaloa cartel and told the world that El Chapo's influence in Mexico was waning. There was a new boss in town and his name was El Mencho. But despite having his face plastered on numerous posters and thousands of articles about him online, nobody really knows Lord Mencho. A black hole of myths and rumors. The cult of personality strategy was one that had been used by several successful drug kingpins, including Pablo Escobar, the Godfather, and El Chapo. However, while his predecessors built an image of the man of the people who were generally loved by the local populace, El Mencho leans to the other side of the spectrum. The drug lord rules his empire with fear and terror. In stark contrast to his contemporary El Chapo, El Mencho lives a simple lifestyle and has no need for luxuries. He works from the shadows, and despite being the head of a global criminal syndicate, the kingpin is a mystery to law enforcement agencies and an enigma to the people. All photos of El Mencho are from his youth, and police descriptions of him are quite nondescript. A rare video of him dancing with his ex-wife went viral in the early 2010s, but has since disappeared from most platforms. Part of the video initially showed his face, but was promptly pulled from the internet, while the part that hides his identity remains one of the few footage of El Mencho in existence. One of the few details that is known about El Mencho is his love for cockfighting. He is known to bet so much on cockfights that it earned him the nickname Lord of the Roosters. El Mencho is built on his reputation as a faceless madman to instill terror and fear in the hearts of millions. He rarely stays in a place for more than 2 days, moving through the mountains and rural villages to evade law enforcement agents. Being immune to the flamboyant lifestyle that intoxicates other drug lords, he is able to direct most of his wealth into purchasing military-grade equipment for his men, many of whom are former mercenaries with military training. With the full strength of psychopaths, sociopaths, and advanced weapons, El Mencho and the CJN have been able to commit so much destruction that the cartel has been likened to ISIS, a first for any Mexican cartel. In 2019, Kyla Mori, head of the DEA unit that has chased El Mencho for years without success, estimated that the CJNG boss could be worth $1 billion. Every single dollar, undoubtedly, is stained with blood. In 2000, the U.S. government put El Mencho and the CJN on its radar after it was discovered that he ran an international cocaine and methamphetamine operation. In 2007, the DEA uncovered a drug operation by El Mencho that went through Colombia, Guatemala, and Mexico before ending in the United States. There was also a second shipment that took the Mexico-Colombia drug route before reaching users in the U.S. 2 more shipments were detected in 2013 before El Mencho changed his modus operandi and began to move meth through China-based gangs from Mexico to Australia, then the United States. The use of Asian gangs was not surprising, as Mexican drug dealers have a long history with Asian drug lords who had brought opium to Mexico in the 1920s and started the country's unending battle with drugs. El Mencho was officially declared wanted in 2011 when Mexico's Office of the General Prosecutor accused him of organized crime involvement and illegal possession of arms. A MXN $2 million bounty was offered for information that could lead to his arrest. In March 2014, the United States indicted El Mencho and his brother Abigail for drug trafficking, being leaders of a continuing criminal enterprise, amongst others. Abigail, known as Los Quines, headed the CJNG offshoot cartel, Los Quines, that ran the cartel's operations in the United States. The boy from Aguililla was now one of the most wanted men in the United States and Mexico. In 2015, El Chapo made his sensational escape from prison and sparked a nationwide manhunt for the man considered the most deadly kingpin in Mexico. With the government's attention on El Chapo, El Mencho was able to recede to the background and do what he did best: wait in the shadows. That same year, the United States sanctioned Nemesio Oseguera El Mencho Cervantes under the Kingpin Act, along with his brother Abigail, the CJN, and Los Quines. All assets belonging to them in the U.S. were confiscated and their bank accounts were frozen. El Mencho was a kingpin, but at the cost of his wealth in the States. El Chapo was able to evade the police for 2 years, but in 2017 he was captured and extradited to the United States. Out of that power vacuum emerged El Mencho from the pits of hell to gobble it up. As Mexico's top drug kingpin, El Mencho took up from where he stopped in his offensive against the government, and the authorities would soon regret not cutting off his wings when they could. On the evening of the 2nd of December 2018, 2 grenades were thrown into the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara. The offices had been closed at the time and no one was injured. One of the bombs had created a 16-inch hole in the wall of the building. No group claimed responsibility for it, but it was believed it had been done by either the CJN or a rival cartel trying to ruin their reputation. On June 28, 2020, the CJN struck Mexico City, a previously forbidden area for cartels. Their target was Mexico City Police Chief Omar Garcia Harfuch. Harfuk was driving to work around 6:30 a.m. through the upscale Lomas de Chapultepec neighborhood when he was ambushed by heavily armed gunmen who had disguised themselves as road workers. The gunmen opened fire on Harfuk's vehicle and riddled it with bullets. Their goal eluded them as Harfuk only suffered injuries and was rushed to the hospital where he made full recovery. Unfortunately, 2 of his bodyguards and a passerby were killed in the assassination attempt. A prominent Mexican journalist, Pascal Beltran del Rico, would later comment that the last time the capital witnessed such an assault was in 1971, 50 years ago. Tearing at the seams. The CJ would become a serious threat in 2017, rivaling the once dominant Sinaloa cartel. However, a familiar dynamic in successful cartels began to play out. El Colombiano, a CJ financier, told El Mencho of a series of robberies done by his close associate, Carlos Enrique Sanchez, aka El Cholo, and in doing so, invite the wrath of El Cholo, who assassinated him. El Mencho was enraged when he found out, and in March 2017, he ordered the murder of El Cholo. The assassination failed, and El Cholo left the CJ to form his own cartel, the Nueva Plaza cartel. On his side was Eric Valencia L85 Salazar, who had aided El Mencho in his war against La Resistencia, and Emilio Alejandro El Tiburon Salazar, another CJ co-founder. El Cholo retaliated by murdering El Maro, the leader of the hit squad that El Mencho had ordered to kill him. The Nueva Plaza cartel would ally itself with the Sinaloa cartel, the CJ's biggest rival, and wage war on their former comrades. The infighting was characteristic of the cartels, where splinter groups eventually broke off from successful cartels and became their rivals. The Nueva Plaza and CJ would clash fiercely for domination of several areas in Jalisco. On the 18th of March 2021, a video of El Cholo being questioned by CJ members was released by the cartel. In the video, El Cholo, who had been severely tortured and handcuffed, confessed to the recent wave of violence in Jalisco. He also confessed that he had met with Garcia Harfuk, the Mexico City chief, who had nearly been assassinated the previous year. He had met with Harfuk to get support in fighting El Mencho and the CJ, and the police chief had told him Garcia, needed something relevant before he could send troops into the city. So, El Cholo had murdered several people and buried them in mass graves to make federal police come into the state. He also confessed to bombing the U.S. consulate in 2018. That same day the video was released, El Cholo's body was found in the public square in Tlaquepaque. Soon after, El Tiburon surrendered to the authorities, and a year later, L85 was arrested. El Mencho had won a second civil war. El Mencho's brutal rise to power has been marked by senseless and barbaric acts of violence by the Jalisco New Generation cartel. On the 18th of December 2017, Juan Luis Lagunas Rosales was plowed with bullets by 4 men armed with rifles. Rosales, who is better known as El Pirata de Culiacan, or the Pirate of Culiacan, was a YouTube star who made the grievous mistake of videotaping himself insulting El Mencho and posting it on YouTube. He was just 17 years old. El Mencho's terrorism in Mexico has made not just civilians, but even law enforcement agents scared of him. That fear is best exemplified in a leaked phone call between El Mencho and a police officer in 2016. In the leaked audio, El Mencho ordered the officer to call back his men, to which the man quickly complied while apologizing profusely. The audio went viral after it was released on the internet, following the capture of the drug lord's brother, Antonio Oseguera, El Tony Montana Cervantes, in December 2023. El Tony Montana is not the only relative of El Mencho who has had to see the inside of a cell. In November 2021, El Mencho's wife Rosalinda Valencia, aka La Jefa, or the Boss, was arrested in Zapopan municipality. She is in charge of the cartel's finances and conducts its money laundering schemes. El Mencho's son, Ruben Oseguera, El Menchito Cervantes, has also been arrested by authorities. It is believed that he is second in command in the cartel and most likely to succeed El Mencho. Other jailed family members include son-in-law Julio Castillo Rodriguez, daughter Jessica Johanna, brother-in-law Elvis Gonzalez Valencia, and godson Adrian Alonso Guerrero Covarrubias. Could the arrest mark the start of El Mencho's downfall? In 2022, rumors spread that El Mencho had been killed by security forces, but the stories were false and probably started by rivals to cause infighting within the cartel. It is known, however, that El Mencho, who is now 58 years old, suffers from kidney disease and has a kidney dialysis machine at his bed. He opened a hospital in the village of El Alcihuatl to take care of his treatment. Today, the Jalisco New Generation generation cartel is dominant in Jalisco, Nayarit, Colima, and 6 other states. It clashes with other cartels for control of Tijuana, Juarez, Tierra Caliente, Guerrero, Riviera Maya, and the state of Mexico. Internationally, the cartel's long arms have reached Colombia, Peru, the United States, Canada, and Australia, to mention a few. Ruben Nemesio Oseguera, El Mencho Cervantes, is the world's most wanted man with bounties of MXN $30 million and $10 million from the Mexican and American governments respectively. He has built an empire from drug trafficking and managed to elude capture for decades. The question we now ask is, how long can he stay hidden? Enjoyed watching this video? Be sure to check our other similar and amazing videos on the screen. Thank you for watching and see you next time.